spotlight your video. Yeah, go ahead and start, Jackie, please.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. My name is Jackie Greenfield, and I'm welcoming you on behalf of the Oldham Peace and Justice group to this webinar and the showing of Not in Our Name. The webinar is in place of a meeting that we were planning to hold in the centre of Oldham. Instead, we have decided to organise it like this, and we're doing this with the support of Manchester PSC, Manchester Palestine Action, Greater Manchester CND, and Greater Manchester Campaign Against the Arms Trade. Our response to this meeting has been fantastic, so thank you very much. Now, we very warmly welcome everybody, particularly our speakers, Colm Bryce, who I know is here, hello Colm, and Eamonn McCann, who is joining us shortly. We know that we have people here from Oldham and Greater Manchester, and that many of you have been involved in some of our local actions and campaigns. Others of you have joined us from similar campaigns, and some are quite far afield. So again, we welcome you. So for those that are joining for the first time, that's great. And again, to those who are watching on the live Facebook stream. We are delighted, as I've said, to see so many of you. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be up on the Oldham Peace and Justice Facebook page after the event if you miss any of it or want to see it again or recommend it to others, which I hope you will. So what we're doing, before showing the film, there is going to be an introduction from Colm Bryce, followed by the film, which lasts about 30 minutes, and then the contribution from Eamonn McCann. We're then opening up the webinar to a question and answer session. We hope to do this through the chat. If you can indicate your question, obviously who you are, we will then be fielding them. We're trying to bring you in so that you can actually address your question. We will see how that goes with so many people. As you've probably gathered, there's a couple of us doing all this, so hopefully that will run smoothly. At the end of the webinar as well, we'll be showing a brief video put together by one of our Elbit rooftop protesters. It's a great little video moment, and you can watch it, or we're showing that as people leave. So Oldham Peace and Justice, currently the main focus of our campaigning is against the presence of Elbit Systems UK. It was Ferranti Technology, a well-known employer in Oldham, and is based in an old mill, Cairo House, in the Greenacres Waterhead area of Oldham. It employs 130 people, and there are 4 other Elbit facilities in the UK. We highlight where we can the direct links with Elbit Ferranti Oldham and the oppression of Palestinian people by the Israeli state and its role in the global arms trade. We're joined too with the Free Kashmir Oldham campaign, when in August last year, with no notice, India revoked 70 years of semi-autonomy for that part of Kashmir it controls and implemented a draconian lockdown. There are many parallels with the situation in Palestine. Oldham Peace and Justice have undertaken a number of local actions: market stalls, street theatre demonstrations, public meetings, monthly vigils outside Elbit, and putting questions to Oldham Council, who agreed that green skills conversion would be a good idea, but were claiming not to really know what went on in the facility. Some of our members are carrying out a detailed research into Elbit Systems Oldham, and in particular, its links to a government funding through a business growth initiative, Sharing in Growth. Nearly a year ago, 3 activists occupied the roof of Cairo House for 3 days, closing the facility down. A local peace camp was established, which generated a lot of interest and support. In spite of a huge police presence and arrests, none of the activists were charged, but it inspired a lot of local street interest, a street meeting, and our regular monthly vigils to build on the growing opposition to Elbit. Elbit Systems is Israel's largest private arms company and supplies a wide range of weapon systems and technologies around the world. These have been developed through what it claims to be an extensive real-world combat experience and field testing, i.e. on Palestinian people. Elbit has been involved in all the major Israeli assaults against Palestinian people in Gaza for over a decade. In 2014 alone, 2,200 Palestinians were killed in the 51-day bombings, including 500 children. Elbit surveillance technologies are used, for example, in Israel's illegal apartheid wall in the occupied West Bank. It is one of the largest manufacturers of drones in the world. 2 Hermes 900 killer drones are being used by the European Maritime Safety Agency to implement its repressive anti-migration policies in the Mediterranean. Elbit technology is also used on the Trump wall on the US-Mexican border, and so the list goes on. Last year at the 2019 Dicey Arms Fair in London, the then Minister for Defence Procurement, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, announced a big new contract with Elbit worth 31 million to provide the Joint Fire Synthetic Trainer. It was described, and I quote, as an incredible Israeli idea built in Oldham, which will sustain 30 jobs. If this was not already enough reason to campaign for Elbit out of Oldham, we learn from the global protest at the recent brutal racist murder of George Floyd by the Minneapolis police that many police forces in the US have been trained by the Israeli security services, and that the Minnesota State Board of Investment holds over $1 billion of shares in Elbit Systems. This deadly thread that links all of this to the Elbit in the old mill building in Oldham reinforces our belief that Elbit Systems' presence in Oldham is unacceptable. It acts as an immediate and tangible focus for our struggle for justice and peace and against oppression around the world. So, the film. We decided as part of our campaigning to arrange this showing of the documentary Not in Our Name, directed by Gabrielle Tierney, who again, we thank for letting us show this today and for donating the DVDs, which we'll have available. The action in Derry shows what can be achieved through local activism and campaigning. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you Colm Bryce. Colm is one of the Raytheon 9, a member of the Derry Anti-War Coalition, and currently lives in southeast London. He works as a publisher for bookmarks and is an active member of Stand Up to Racism and the Socialist Workers' Party. Colm, we welcome you. And hopefully unmute you.
Thanks very much, Jackie. I'm really honoured to be asked to come and introduce the film today. It's a great film, and I think it's very inspiring, and I hope you get a lot out of it. I was trying to think about how to introduce it, and what came to mind was that when I was watching that magnificent footage of the people in Bristol tearing down the statue of Edward Colston and dumping him in the river, it reminded me so much of exactly how we felt the day we occupied the Raytheon offices in Derry and smashed up all their equipment in 2006 in the middle of the Lebanon war. And that's for 2 reasons. And first is that sometimes it feels that you really have to take matters into your own hands, especially in such an urgent moment as it was during the Lebanon war. Sometimes so often we have huge demonstrations on the streets, and then we're expected to think that the next day everything just continues as normal, business resumes as usual. And for us in Derry in 2006, it really became intolerable to go back to normal. And I often think that, when I was watching that on Sunday, I was thinking, the Raytheon 9 and the people who also occupied the factory in 2009 in Derry during the Israeli bombing of Palestine, the Gaza Strip, is that we were just sort of the people who went and brought the ropes and attached them to the statue and pulled it down. Because the other point that I always try to make when I'm introducing this film is that we were not acting alone, very, very far from it. We were acting as part of a movement that we'd all been involved in Derry for years, that campaigned against Raytheon, that campaigned against the Afghanistan and Iraq war, that constantly tried to drag the issue of Raytheon into the glare of local publicity and to put local politicians on the spot and ask them how they could defend bringing one of the biggest arms companies in the world to Derry and say that this was part of our peace process. I mean, we challenged Bill Clinton when he came to Derry, making speeches about peace and look at the eyes of the children, and said to him, what about the children of Iraq? What about the children of Sudan? Or what about the children of Palestine, where Raytheon bombs have been used against the people? So what happened in Raytheon, at Raytheon, came on the back of years and years of campaigning, people signing petitions, sort of debates locally in Derry, all the time where we were trying to highlight these things, because these companies like Raytheon always try to hide behind lies and so on. They're ashamed themselves of what they do. They know exactly how bad it is what they do, and to try and make that was a constant feature of all our campaigning for sort of easily 10 years beforehand. And if there one sort of slight, I'll not say criticism, but one thing that I'm slightly disappointed about with the film is that it kind of tends to focus on the 9 of us rather than all the people who not only built that movement but also sustained us incredibly through our trial and through 2 years of court cases and those sorts of things when we're eventually released. But that's a small point. But it is to try and emphasize that fact that it's the political movement that we build, that we have to create everywhere, a movement that takes up solidarity with the Palestinians, that says that it's not normal to have an arms trade that deals in death like this, that that imperialist wars are not inevitable, and so on. And I think it just has to be remembered that everybody has got a part and can play a role in that movement, in building that movement, in taking on the lies and hypocrisy of our rulers and those things, and all those sorts of things. I mean, I really, really hope that you enjoy this really excellent film that was made by Gabrielle Tierney. Gabrielle grew up with us in Derry and then moved to the Grenfell area in London, and this film was made with young people from the Grenfell area as part of a project she was working on. And it's a great tribute to her, what she was able to do. And I was so glad that she was able to capture some of the story, because I hope that it inspires other people. So, I mean, I think I want to just wish you all well in your campaigning. I think it's wonderful, all the stuff that you've already done against Elbit systems. And I would encourage everybody, wherever they are, wherever they're tuning in from on this call, to think about what they can do in order to highlight these sorts of injustices. I'll just finish by saying I was incredibly inspired and proud to come from Derry today, because I saw a sign in Seattle in an area called Capitol Hill where the protesters have barricaded themselves off from the police as part of this magnificent movement that we're seeing exploding around the world. And somebody had made a replica of Free Derry Corner, and they had said, "You are now entering Free Capitol Hill." And I think that was a lovely, very, very proud and inspiring moment. And I think that sort of spirit of it being one world, one struggle is, I think, what we have to take into all our campaigning. So thanks very much for having me today. I really hope you enjoy the film, and all the best with all your campaigning.
Colm, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you. And there's going to be a clap if we could hear everybody. I know you've got to go off.
I'll stay around for a while, but I have to have another meeting at 7. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot going on in London at the moment, so yeah.
I'm sure there is. So, and that reminds me, I think I left it out. I said it right at the beginning, but if people do want to ask questions, please can you start putting them up on the chat if you think of them as you go on. I guess if there was anything specifically for Colm, we could get you again, or you might see them come up, which is great.
I'll stay on the chat for a while and answer them if I can. Do you know what I mean? So
okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And again, please remind people, if you could put your questions up there with your name, I think that comes up anyway. We will do our best after the film, after Eamonn, to have the question and answer session. So hopefully we are now going to go to the film. And thank you very much, Colm, again, and good campaigning struggle.
Yeah, Jackie, we're just teeing up the film. We're going to start the movie and then we're going to share our screen. So
thank you.
if we go ahead and go. So we're ready to start.
Thank you.
I hope that when the arms industry is abolished, that people can look back and see among the actions which ended the arms industry will be this.
Sorry, I think we had a little technical issue. We're going to rewind, go all the way back to the beginning to make sure we get all that audio.
Okay, yes, thank you for those of you. Yes, we're clearly having a little technical, but I'm sure we'll get over that. And we're starting again.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
Arms companies fuel war for profit. People will wonder in the future why and how it was that people tolerated this industry, which is responsible for pulling down death on innocent human beings around the world. I hope that when the arms industry is abolished, that people can look back and see among the actions which ended the arms industry will be this little action in this little town which we undertook.
There are lots of types of civil disobedience. If you take physical action of a very violent kind, it is revolutionary. It is intended to change the government. But people who take action which is designed to draw attention to it, kill anyone, then you're in a very interesting area. And I think that what the Raytheon people did was to establish in law that they had no obligation to obey a law that was contrary to their conscience.
For all of my lifetime and longer, Derry has been a place of very high unemployment. The town was starved of investment and starved of jobs because there was a Catholic majority here. And it was that feeling of being discriminated against which gave rise to the civil rights movement, which was demanding equality, and which came onto the streets in 1968.
The significance of that movement was the sense in which Derry people felt themselves connected to the struggle for justice right around the world.
The reaction of the state here to the civil rights movement, the brutality of the reaction, which prompted people involved in the civil rights movement, or some of them, to take to more drastic measures. Again, it's not the full story, but in a way, that's where the IRA campaign came from. And of course, the Troubles, theory at least, came to an end with the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. And people in Derry were told that jobs would be created here as a result of the peace process.
The Raytheon arrived in Derry in 1999, the year after the Good Friday Agreement was signed. The announcement of the opening of the Raytheon plant here was made by John Hume and David Trimble. It was the first thing they did after receiving their Nobel Peace Prizes. And at the time, John Hume said that Raytheon would be welcomed with open arms by all the people of Derry.
The Raytheon factory, an arms company, was going to set up in Derry as part of the peace dividend. And of course, many local people, and not just radicals and civil rights activists, sort of could immediately see the irony in an arms factory being established as part of the peace dividend.
Raytheon coming to Derry was a denial and an affront to all the things that Derry stood for, you know, going right back to the start of the civil rights movement.
We live in a city that suffered the results of war for 30 years. People here know what it's like to see their loved ones die because of a war. The idea that we could actually sit here and have as part of our peace dividend to be that we were going to bring murder and massacres to other countries, we just couldn't accept that.
What finally prompted the occupation of Raytheon was the bombing of Cana in southern Lebanon, when we heard that it was a bunker buster bomb which had caused that massacre in Cana. We are immediately aware that that was a Raytheon bomb, because Raytheon is the sole supplier of such weapons to Israel. On the news, we could see the carnage of Cana. We could see the babies being brought from the rubble of this building and dripping bundles. And we knew that this company that made those bombs had a plant 2 miles down the road. The people of Cana were not distant people from us. You know, if we're concerned about oppression in the world, the people of Cana were our neighbours. The children were the children of our neighbours. So we did it out of that. We occupied Raytheon, if you like, out of a neighbourly duty.
The people's flag is deep as red, it's shrouded off the map of day. And ere the limbs grew stiff and cold, their hearts blood died in every fold. Then raged the scarlet standing high, beneath its folds we'll live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we'll keep the red flag flying here.
So we were sitting in Sandino's bar, which is where we had the meeting in which we first talked about occupying the factory.
We talked about a possibility of taking out the mainframe computer, which we believed, and turned out to be true, would disable not just the Derry plant, but might disable other Raytheon plants. And in the event it did, 25 of us assembled at 8 o'clock on the morning of the 9th of August, which by coincidence was the exact anniversary of the bombing of Nagasaki. Went down to the Raytheon plant. We didn't know whether we were going to get in. As it happened, getting into the plant was very easy. I mean, people were coming in to work in another employment, which was in the same building. And as the security people opened the door to allow the workers in, we just made a rush for it. And we got in.
Wednesday, 9th of August, 2006, possible file DCU. At the Raytheon building, there's a number of persons inside that have taken over the building and are throwing items, computer disks, paper, etc., onto the roadway.
I was prepared for maybe just blocking the outside doors, if that's all we could have done, to have got through the doors and smashed the front door and got in, barricading ourselves. And I was really relieved that we'd done that.
We got all the furniture and we put it up against the doors.
We definitely had a real feeling. I know certainly from a few of us, you know, that we were going to do a lot of damage, or as much damage as we could.
Taking the computers apart, throwing them out the window, smashing all the computers, and we attacked the mainframe computer, physically smashed it, and used a fire extinguisher on it until we were certain that it wasn't working anymore and that we had actually cut the plant off from communicating with any other part of the Raytheon complex.
For me, the target was the mainframe computer. You know, see when that was done, and it was done right away. Basically, that's what I went for. I sat back and I thought, what else could we do here?
The person known to me as Eamonn McCann. He was quite relaxed. He's not in any aggressive mood.
It was like a remarkably short period of time in which all that happened. So it happened in the first half hour.
And I remember hunger still at one stage with a few sweets and stuff.
I mean, we were in touch with the media throughout, I mean, with mobile phones. I mean, and actually in the middle of the occupation, I did a live interview with the local BBC.
Eamonn McCann's now giving a speech to the assembled press people.
On the line is Eamonn McCann, who's inside the building, as I understand it, along with members of the Foyle Ethical Investment Campaign. Eamonn McCann, good morning to you.
Good morning, Paul.
What's happening? A bit of noise there just as we came across here. What's happening at the moment there?
Well, there's a group of us inside the Raytheon plant here at Springtown. There's about, I think, 8 or 9 inside. There's about 20 people outside. And we've taken this action we're disrupting as far as we can the operation of the Raytheon company here in Derry. And we're trying to dramatise the fact, if you like, that Raytheon as a company is inextricably linked into the Israeli military machine. It has a role in the horrible violence which we see, or a little bit of which we see on our television screens every night. And I think it's a widespread feeling that people just want to be doing something about it.
This wasn't simply a sudden protest against Raytheon or a general protest against the arms industry. It was a specific attempt to have a practical impact on what was happening in Lebanon.
The next significant thing that really happened that morning was that these hostage negotiators arrived from Belfast, which made me think, my God, this is a really serious thing. This is like something you see in a film.
Which rather took us all aback because we thought, good grief, I mean, why did the negotiators from Belfast? But then it turned out that they actually thought that we were probably armed, that this was going to be an armed siege.
Part of my job is to just keep the negotiators talking to prevent the police coming in with their cutting equipment.
And meanwhile, outside, we were all really frightened. We'd all been pushed back out of the car park.
With actually sort of the gate.
That never been talked to the gate. Go to the gate. I'm coming back again. Do you think I'm leaving the corners there?
And then we saw these huge cars going in with all these guys with balaclavas on and dogs in the back of them. So we just thought, oh my God, what are they going to do to them?
I just got up and looked over at all the barricades that we had at the doors, and the whole corridor, for as far as you could see, it was just all these big black helmets with visors, you know what I mean?
The police smashed through. They used a chainsaw to cut their way into the place. They came in dressed in riot gear with visors and plastic bullet guns, shouting, "Protesters, we call upon you to surrender," and stuff like that. It was ridiculously dramatic. By this time, we were playing cards, but we were bored. We were in there for 8 hours. We had done everything we had come to do, so we were playing cards.
I don't know what image they have, but I had a full
house. But they came and arrested us all, threw us on the ground, handcuffed us behind our backs, frog marched us or escorted us or dragged us from the premises and took us to jail.
The night in Coleraine police station was the worst. It's that feeling that you always get when you're in custody, and that feeling of complete powerlessness.
As soon as we started destroying the equipment, we knew we were going to be arrested here and we might well go to jail.
The discussion in the cell all morning, you know, had been, oh, we're never getting out of here, we're never getting out of here, and that sort of thing. I remember you singing in Coleraine police station in the cell, they said you were singing Joe or something, which is lovely, you know what I mean? But I tell you, I felt very lonely in that cell.
They were in the local cop shop one night, and then they're in McGabbery prison for 36 hours, basically. And those 2 nights, I think, were probably 2 of the worst nights of my life, not being able to explain to our daughter where her dad was. When I went to bed that night, I just thought, this is what it would be like if he was dead, because there's just no way of contacting, no way. And I really, for the first time, understood what it must have been like for people who did have family in prison.
The court decided to take the trial and send it to Belfast because the prosecution argued that all of us, but myself in particular, they said that I was a very popular person in Derry and the jury in Derry would be biased in my favour. I had the weird experience of hearing my own barrister jumped to his feet and said, "Oh no, my lord, you can't say that this man's terribly popular in Derry. He's not popular at all. Indeed, he has stood for election on a number of occasions and got a derisory vote."
I was a bit concerned about what the family thought of me, you know. But I may in the court the next morning, when me and Colm were up together, and I may just turn around and see the family at that time, so I got there and clap them. I thought it was brilliant. They was support, and I felt vindicated at that moment.
I mean, I think it's outrageous with the media coverage. It was an endless source of frustration to us in preparing for the trial and trying to mount the defence campaign.
We were blasted through at the media, you know, with all the coverage we had as thugs and vandals. You know, have I not got better things to do with my time? But come and take out work and go through it just for a bit of wanton vandalism.
Well, I know for a year after I was prejudiced, my work, I lost a job. That's irrelevant. That doesn't matter. Like, but I found myself sort of blacklisted.
There was definitely a cynicism and a dismissiveness in local media and national media.
Well, the media are part of the problem. You see, we boast about free speech. There's no point in having free speech if no one hears you. And if you can blank out what is being said or distort it, then you may have had the right to say it, but nobody knows about it.
Newspaper editors and even journalists decided not to cover the story because they politically disapproved of what we had done and therefore didn't want to give it any publicity.
I'm not just saying this for ourselves, but I thought there were some really important things that happened in the trial. I mean, getting that Raytheon executive on the stand was absolutely astonishing. You know, you couldn't have made him up for somebody who was so contemptuous of protest, of what was happening in the Middle East. Says he never watches the news, didn't know really about what happened in Israel and Palestine.
We defended ourselves on the basis that we were not criminals, but attempting to stop a greater crime.
Talking directly to the police, they would sort of say, you know, sort of, oh, why have you done this and why are you using violence? And all of us were very keyed up on that thing about, you know, saying, no, this is non-violent direct action, but we are doing this in order to try and save human life. And we believe there's a long political and moral tradition going back to the Nuremberg trials after the Second World War. The people who had bombed the railway tracks that led to the concentration camps in order to prevent the trains getting through were judged to have not committed a crime because they were trying to prevent the commission of a greater crime. That's our moral political justification.
And we said to the court that we were in the position of someone who's walking along the street and who hears the sound of a child being brutalized in a house. If that person smashes down the door of the house, I mean, strikes perhaps and assaults the abuser of the child, could you say that that person is guilty of a crime? We say no, that person was attempting to stop a greater crime than breaking and entering.
The greatest enemy that anybody has when they're opposing injustice is to feel that they're on their own. Whether you're in the middle of a conflict or whether you're just someone who feels that the world should be a better place, the biggest enemy is loneliness. All of us are susceptible to the idea we can't do anything, we're on our own. And therefore, anything that says you're not on your own, that is the most enormously influential thing you can do.
When we went to Lebanon, one of the things that surprised us was that quite a lot of people knew about the occupation of the Raytheon company here. And
to come so close to what had happened and to see firsthand and meet firsthand the people who suffered in that situation was really, really humbling.
In Cana, we talked to members of the two families. It was two extended families accounted for all the casualties. When you actually look into the eyes of the victims of something like this, it gives you sort of an understanding of it at a different level, at a far more human level.
Seeing all the graves laid out, you know, was an incredibly emotional thing. Sorry.
Struck me really forcibly sitting talking to Senna Shalhoub and other members of the Shalhoub family in their home in Cana. This is just like Bloody Sunday. These are exactly the same feelings, sort of, and that mixture of sort of grief and anger and also of forgiveness.
Cana's just a small town, you know, so only a few thousand people. And Hala Shalhoub came down to speak to us. Hala had just told us the story about actually what had happened, you know, and sort of made it so real. There were a number of extended families, the Hashims and Shalhoubs, you know, just who lived in that little part of Cana. And there was one building that was sort of 3 stories and there was a basement in it. So they had been in the basement for 18 days. When the missile came through at night, everyone was sleeping. The feeling of that experience of a bunker buster bomb penetrating through a building and then going into the earth before exploding. The building came down on top of them, but also all the dirt underneath also came up all around them. Everyone was buried. Her mouth was full of dirt, so she couldn't speak or couldn't call out. Her 2 daughters were lying sleeping beside her. From one of them, she didn't hear ever again, but from Ruqayya, she did hear her trying to call. They took Ruqayya to the neighbour's house, but she died there because the ambulances couldn't get through. You know, that was only one bomb, that was one family. That happened to me for 34 days. So it was an incredibly humbling thing, but also, you know, I think just deepened all of our commitment, made us feel even more confident that we would go into the trial and talk about it. And but sorry, I'm getting really overcome here. Don't mean to, but I remember
that experience in McCann,
So it was a reminder sort of our common humanity and the fact that none of us is unique and no community is unique, however distinctive it is, and all the struggles and conflicts are different and the contexts are all different. But when you get down to it, human beings are the same. Human beings are the same. That's one of the things we learned.
Lots of people in Lebanon, both in Beirut and in southern Lebanon, were saying to us, you know, we thought we were on our own. The world wasn't listening to us. We couldn't understand why were we being bombed like this on a daily, hourly basis, and the world seemed to be ignoring it. And then we heard that, you know, what she had done and knew we weren't on our own. And, you know, you don't think that when we did, it never occurred to us that people in Lebanon would actually get some strength from the fact that we'd done what was a relatively small thing here, really.
The first time I came across the Raytheon protest, as far as I can remember, is I read an article about it, and I remember thinking, protest in Derry, because I know Eamonn McCann, I'm fairly certain that he's going to be in the middle of this. I'd also, because I know Eamonn, I thought, oh, blimey, he's going to go to jail for this, isn't he? And then when he didn't, I thought this is marvellous.
It was a very important event, the Raytheon judgment, because what a jury said was that you have no moral obligation to obey a law that is contrary to your conscience.
You remember we got the not guilty stand in the dock? We didn't know what way the jury, they were hardly judged, weren't they? They were hardly judged. But we knew, we kind of knew, you know,
we
during the
watched it
trial.
every day, didn't we? Then people became our people.
You know, some people in the anti-war movement were very gloomy about our prospects in Belfast, and said a jury in Belfast was likely to have a majority of Protestants and who would tend to be unionist, and the perception in Derry would be that would be quite a right wing. But far from it, far from it. I mean, after the first day, looking at the jury and the witness box, were following it very closely. And after a few days, we were confident that we can make our case convincing. These people in the jury are going to believe us and we're going to be acquitted. So we had a lot of trust in the jury after a few days, and that trust turned out to be justified.
But the fact that a group of protesters could make the sort of protest they made in Derry against this pernicious company, go to trial, and the jury and the judge go, yeah, all right, off you go. You were technically committing a crime, but it was in order to prevent a far greater crime, the crime of the arms companies. I think that's an enormously optimistic message, I think, that's been sent out.
People in Derry who opposed the occupation of the Raytheon plant made the point by occupying the Raytheon factory. We not only were running the risk of chasing Raytheon out of Derry, we would also deter similar companies from investing in Derry in the future.
Attracting investment in Derry during the Troubles was very, very difficult. You can't maybe lobby people to come to a war zone as easy as come to people where there's peace. People think that these job opportunities walk to you. They don't. You have to go there looking for them. The Ford Motor Company are involved in war, they make tanks. So when we stop all driving Ford cars, Ford Fiestas and stuff, you know, where do you stop with this argument? There's one particular company who's been singled out, in my opinion, in that city.
You know, you have to make a balance between the interests of Derry and having jobs on the one hand and the interests of the people of the world, if you like. We decided that the balance very firmly came down on the side of taking out the Raytheon plant, even at the with the possibility of risking the jobs in Derry. We weren't concerned about that.
At a political level, I think the contortions that the local politicians have gone through have been absolutely astonishing to see. The reaction of the local business class, the reaction of the local political class, I think, has just revealed that the involvement in the arms trade fundamentally is just so deeply corrupting of our society, of our politics.
If you read sort of the statements of Raytheon executives, they actually speak in a political way about the Middle East, about the war on terror, saying that the war on terror is a necessary thing, and they lobby explicitly for increased arms expenditure, particularly in the United States.
I think it is quite possible that there will come a time in society when people look back on the arms trade and think, what are we doing?
The more bombs that are dropped, the more bombs have to be replaced in the arsenals of the countries which are dropping the bombs. All arms companies have a business interest in bloodshed.
We spent billions of pounds ensuring that these companies could construct landmines and heat-seeking missiles that could burn the retinas of anybody who got in the way, instantly blinding them in the most unimaginable agony. There were people who sat around and cleverly devised this at the same time as there were millions of people around the world who, just by virtue of the fate of where they were born, were desperate for the most basic medicines and basic water and basic food that was being stockpiled in another bit of the world.
The day will come fairly soon when people will look at the arms industry the way they look back now at the slave trade, which supplied jobs, which supplied riches and prosperity to Western cities and countries.
Congratulate ourselves, don't we, on, especially Britain. We were the first to abolish slavery. I love that. We should be proud, the Conservative argument, we should be proud we were the first to abolish slavery, which just seems to miss out the one bit of that whole little conundrum that we could only abolish it because we were fucking doing it in the first place. I was thinking, only if Harold Shipman had stopped killing grannies just a few months before he was caught. I was the first doctor to stop killing grannies. Whee, making them mayor.
See, the way of change occurs in history is like this. To begin with, if you argue for something, votes for women, a good example, you're ignored. If you go on, you're mad. Better touch of that myself. If you go on, you're dangerous. Then there's a pause, and then you can't find anyone at the top who doesn't claim to have thought of it in the first place. That is how progress is made. And I think the Stop the War Coalition and the Raytheon campaign are examples. Ignored, mad, dangerous, and now everybody recognizes you've got to go about the problems in a different way.
But what we were doing really was sort of making a tiny contribution to what is an increasing movement around the world. In Britain alone, there are 5 or 6 locations at the moment where there are people picketing and demonstrating outside. In the United States, there are people opposing and holding demonstrations against Raytheon. And since our action, we're in touch with those people. All of them contacted us. So we're in email contact with people sort of all over the world.
Treat other people as you would like to be treated yourself. And that is the basic golden rule of world morality. And it's on trade union banners. An injury to one is an injury to all. We have a moral responsibility for each other. And when people actually put that into practice, they may well come into conflict with the law.
Palestine, free, free, Palestine, free, free, Palestine, free, free, Palestine, free.
Well, it's fairly obvious why we're protesting here today. We're in the middle of the Israeli onslaught in Gaza. We know that their F-16 fighters are dropping missiles on a minute-by-minute basis, and we're here the same way as we were during the Lebanese war in 2006, to say that we don't want a company in our town that's complicit in the war crimes that have been carried out at the moment.
To show support, solidarity with people in Palestine, people in Gaza and on the West Bank, and to say this is outrageous and it can't be done in our name. It's been done in our name because of the involvement of Raytheon. It's been done in our name because of the support that's been given to Israel.
I think there's a lot of parallels with what happened in Lebanon in 2006 and what's happened there, although I think it's much worse in Gaza.
I stood outside factories in England and asked English workers not to make plastic bullets that have been used to kill children in Ireland. And I couldn't at all conscience do that and yet say that I'm indifferent to people making things in my city that have been used to kill children somewhere else.
What's happening here illustrates the need for activism. All attempts to energise the major political parties have failed, and we are left with no option. Our target is absolutely clear. Our aim is absolutely clear. By non-violent, peaceful, direct action to get Raytheon out of Derry.
What we did in August 2006, it was all about that. It was all about trying to say that we were doing something to stand beside those people.
What I would say, given the same circumstances, given the same climate again, I would do the exact same thing.
So,
and I'll do it better.
Definitely. I think we've carried through the trial and everything. And I hope that getting a victory and getting off, give a lift to everybody is involved in the war movement. Whatever it is that they can do.
I think there are two flames burning in the human heart. the flame of anger against injustice and the flame of hope we could build a better world. And all the Raytheon did was to fan, those campaigns fanned both flames of hatred against war and hope that you could do something about it. A very important historical event.
I think that none of us regrets, I certainly don't regret any part of it at all. I know there were scary moments along the way, sort of times of apprehension. When I've been involved in politics for more than 40 years, since the early days of the civil rights movement and the troubles in Northern Ireland, and without any doubt, what we did at Raytheon was the best thing I've ever done in my life.
How I've come to wonder about this safe cocoon. What's this hard shell cover? What have I been made to do? Now they call me deadly, say that I'm to blame. Even had some dream last night that I'd turn into flames. If I am alone and soaring high above the crimson sand, say a prayer, I think I'm falling, 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 falling to the ground.
That was fantastic. That's a big applause. Thank you very, very much. Actually, I'm not sure, well, I don't think I've mentioned this, but I think we made the link this morning that it was on the 11th of June 2008 that I think you were, that the court case decided in your favour. So it's a kind of, it happens to be today. So I think we didn't set that up purposely, and I hope that's a right fact. But that was, thank you very much. And so many parallels and things. Can I remind people that if they've got questions to put them in the chat. Before we are going to move on in a minute, Eamonn I know is here somewhere, and Eamonn, you are going to take the Zoom. But thank you, Colm, again, and Eamonn for being here today. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting questions. Put them in the chat and we'll come back to them afterwards. I'm being asked to remind people again that if you do want the DVD, just email us on Oldham Peace and Justice. Also, yes, and I'll come back at the end to fundraising for our own group as well, because we don't have many funds, but we'll do that after we've heard from Eamonn. So are we able to bring Eamonn to the fore?
Can you hear me?
There you are. Brilliant. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. That was very inspiring, and over to you.
Well, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Oh,
I'm assuming that other people can. I'm going to mute.
Okay, that's good. The first thing I'd like to say is sort of just reacting to what I've seen over the last half hour or so, really is to say, well, a couple of things. And one is this, I tend to ramble a bit, so you just have to put up with that. Like, you can't really shut up when you like. The Colm mentioned there about the internationalism of these things. And Colm mentioned that, I think it was in Seattle, he said there was a sign saying you're now entering a free Seattle, and that this had been adapted from you're now entering free Derry, which is on Free Derry Wall. Now, the interesting thing about that is the Free Derry Wall, that slogan, you're now entering free Derry, came from the United States, just down the coast from Seattle. And I had seen a picture of that, I think 1965, very early. The Berkeley Free Speech Movement, some of the more grizzled members of the audience might recall it. They occupied Berkeley College, and the sign, just how to say, you're now entering free Berkeley. And I'd seen that, which is where the slogan, you're now entering free Derry, came from. And I was delighted to see that it's now gone back to the United States and so on, and the circle complete. So that's sort of a lovely coincidence. That also, what I mainly think when I watched the film, that's only the second time I've watched it. I watched it when it came out and earlier, and very emotional experience. I found the whole Raytheon thing. Colm said that and showed it as well. That it's I found it deeply emotional. I can remember in the village of Cana, standing with a woman called Shalhoub, and she had lost 4 members of her family in the Raytheon bomb when they had been incinerated and blown to bits in a basement. And I can remember when she hugged me, and it was very, very difficult not to simply dissolve when that happened. And I still dissolve sort of when I think about it. When I think about all the people that I met sort of in Cana. And Colm and I were sort of in Cana. We met the loveliest people, sort of one of whom was the second in command of Hezbollah, sort of down there, and I know it's got a scary reputation. Lovely people all together. But you know, the lesson I draw from it all, both going out to Cana, which was a singular and intense experience, but also what we have been doing, is that organization never goes amiss. Even small campaigns, as Colm mentioned, I mean, it didn't come out of nowhere. Sort of our occupation of Raytheon. I mean, before that, and this was turned out to be important for our court case. You know, we had marched, we had picketed, we had written letters, we had taken up petitions, we had screamed and roared and about Raytheon, and nothing seemed to work. What we did discover afterwards that it had created sort of a little bubble in the consciousness of Derry. So that when we came to do this, people who might have disapproved of us, disapproved of what we were doing, nevertheless had some understanding sort of the background to it. And I think that was very important from the point of view of relations within the town. You know, it's and you know, we can say glibly, and I do at times, well, you know, there's all these concerns about jobs and so forth and that, but we thought this was more important. And that's true. We all did. It's also important to remember that jobs are very important too. Jobs are very important in a working class town, which was suffered high levels of poverty. And these were good jobs by Derry standards. You know, they were highly skilled jobs for a multinational company. It wasn't a backstreet workshop. So we knew we were asking a lot. We were asking to ask them to support us in this enterprise. And in the end, we got a sufficient support. But one of the things that did, it may not have come across strongly enough in the film, was that as Colm said, establishment parties wouldn't support us. In fact, we were subjected to abuse from, not that I made it at all then or now, you know, from local media, from local politicians, were shouted at in the streets. I still have it said to me at times. You know, it's you know, you chase jobs out of this town. Now you're talking about unemployment. You're a hypocrite. And it's all these years later. I mean, that's quite a regular little angry conversation that I might have with people in Derry. But it's also deliberate, of course. What was Raytheon doing here? Raytheon doing here? I mean, I think it was Colm mentioned before the film. Raytheon's a highly political company. If you read sort of some of the Raytheon's got one of the biggest lobbying operations in Washington. I mean, it makes the Patriot, it makes the Javelin, and so it's got very, very close connections with power. There's an executive of Raytheon on the advisory committee on procurement for the British Ministry of Defence. They have half a dozen people in such situations in the United States. They're one of the biggest donors to the Republican Party in the United States. And as we mentioned on the film, they have an interest, therefore, in war, and they're quite open about it. If you Google Raytheon in Israel, for example, you will see that over and over again, they speak out. The executives of Raytheon make their speeches, and they speak out about the need to stand by Israel, the need to re-equip Israel, the need for more arms. They say it openly, explicitly in those terms. And the subtext is, we need war. We need war. And they're very powerful people, and they're pushing for war. And when we talk about, as we do, sort of the strategy of the American ruling class in relation to the Middle East and in relation to the world generally, It's we always this identity of interest between big money sort of and the right-wing politics of the Republican Party and others in the United States. But it's interesting when you can see it explicitly stated, you know, sort of that we need to build these out, which will help our economy, which will provide jobs and will safeguard our safety through putting down rebellion and sort of ensuring sort of that the stability of a Middle East dominated by Israeli power. So it's not also it used to be, my memory, and we'd be arguing that all this is political, you know, sort of about the arms trade and everything else. They say it. There's no company that I know sort of has said so explicitly over and over again. I know this because I'm on the Raytheon company's email list. They believe and that I am the defence correspondent of Belfast. I told them that I'm putting in to be put on their mailing list about 3 times a week. I get wonderful documents from Raytheon as they boast with pride of the added lethality. Not a great phrase, the added lethality of their next a weapon system. And you know, the conclusion I draw from this really is that I think Tony Benn sort of was adumbrating this when he spoke there. That whether you know it or not, I've heard Ben say this before, when you fight against power, when you fight against capitalist power, you're fighting in solidarity with millions of people, hundreds of millions of people around the world, whether you know it or not, whether they are aware of you or not. And to an extent, sort of which can surprise us, they are, as Colm mentioned, sort of been discovering people in Lebanon who actually heard of our little operation. That absolutely took me aback. So when I went out there, you know, it's and I said in that film, but I still say it all these years later, 12, whatever it is, you know, that I look back on, if anybody ever said to me, and I'm sure they think it, they don't say it, have you ever done anything useful in your life, McCann? I'll immediately say I was part of the operation, of the protests, the actions which drove Raytheon out of Derry. And I'm immensely proud of the fact that when they eventually left from Derry, because of the movement, we helped trigger it or sort of reignite it and so forth. When they left, they said they were leaving Derry because they had discovered that the state could not guarantee their safety. Imagine that. You know, they're bombing the whole world, you know, and that the state in Derry couldn't protect them from people like Goretti Horgan and Colm, sort of, and the rest of us. So I'd hope that it's if it inspires anybody, you know, and very pompous for me or anybody else involved to say, oh, we inspired people. So we inspired ourselves. That's who we mainly inspired. But I do know sort of that we played some role sort of in driving forward that sense that we can take on power. And as Tony Benn was saying, there's amazing the number of people that afterwards, well, some, as I say, still blame us and will still be utter, you know, tell us that we were ne'er-do-wells and created destruction and so forth. I mean, within years, as Tony Benn said there, amazing sort of the number of people who now decided that we were right. And I'm very polite and you know, sort of a person. I don't like to hurt anybody or disagree with them and so on. So I don't say to them, it's a bit fucking late now for you to say that, isn't it? Why didn't you speak out when we faced the possibility of prison terms? All the people on the nationalist side now, Sinn Féin and the SDLP, boy, are they supporters of the Raytheon 9 now. They'd not a syllable from any of them to support us, quite a lot of syllables denouncing us at the time. So Ben was right on that. The worm turns, public opinion turns, the world shifts on its axis at times in terms of dominant ideologies. So it's I don't know, sir, what word to say. So if I'll answer any questions, I try to, that anybody has. But I know sort of, I remember you're talking about sort of how I forget who was it, Colm, I think, mentioned in the phone, I mean, how important it is sometimes when there's only even a small protest, how important it can be to the people with whom you're expressing solidarity. I can remember at the beginning of the civil rights movement when we were involved in a bit of a battle sort of in Derry. And it was very early because Harold Wilson was the Prime Minister. And the reason I know that is a small group of anarchists led by John Ratty, he used to edit a newspaper called Freedom in London. And about half a dozen other people, Harold Wilson was taking off in a helicopter for summer holidays in the Scilly Islands. And they ran forward and stopped the helicopter taking off for 5 or 10 minutes. That's all. Nevertheless, they said they were doing it for the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland. And I remember people were in the midst of riots and so on. Saying, boy, did you see that? Did you see about the anarchists who stopped Wilson taking off? And we're delighted. It really gave us a boost that other people were doing something sort of, and we were part of them, and they felt a part of us. So a protest is never, ever wasted. It's never wasted. It's never for nothing. It always contributes something, and at times it can be small and contribute mightily to something which is growing. And we should keep that in mind when sometimes we feel isolated, as we do. Of course, feel isolated at times, and the all mainstream opinion is going against you. You can't find any nook or cranny to feel politically comfortable. Nevertheless, sort of with what you're doing, sort of, keep on keeping on as the Redskins. I don't know how many people remember the Redskins. They were a terrific band in the 1980s. I leave it there. I hear people.
Right, that is fantastic, and thank you very, very much indeed. We are going to bring in a member of our group to talk about one of their immediate action, but we have got a number of questions. After we've heard from the member of our group, I've been given some, and Jackie Burke, you've been gathering questions as well, haven't you? Yes, so we will come back to questions. So please, people, put them in the chat and we will try to bring you in. Eamonn, thank you so much. It is very inspiring, and we're another clap on behalf of everybody. So yeah. AD, can we have the spotlight on AD? Hello. And we need to unmute you, don't we? Just a minute. No, just.
Hi, you can hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. No, thank you so much, Eamonn. Sorry for that. It's just wonderful to see such an inspiring action and what it led to, because we had obviously during the bombing of Gaza in 2014, everybody was seeing up close so much horror, and I think the actions that were taken then were because we were seeing it so close and we were taking it so personally. And that's what has happened recently with George Floyd. With this, we see it so close, and it resonates with so much work that people have been doing with the horrors, the injustice, and it makes people take big, direct action. And of course, direct action only works on the back of so much hard work. And for example, around Elbit, we've done a lot of stalls, we've done a lot of awareness raising about the bombing. But for example, in 2014, when we went on the roof of the Elbit factory in Shenstone, which is the UAV engines, when we went there, we were there for 3 days, and it suddenly, went crazy. All the media that was on the links, the direct complicit links. And while I was on that roof, I was a teacher in Gaza for 2 years. My student was killed by a drone, and this was a drone factory, and it was a student I knew very well, and she had 2 little babies, and obviously her husband and mother-in-law. They were all killed in one bomb from a drone.
AD, we're losing your sound. AD? Jackie? AD, we can't hear you.
You'll hear me.
AD, something's happening with your audio. So
can you hear me now?
We can, but it's
right.
Coming.
Sorry, no, it was just sorry about that, but it was just to say that when we talked about the connect of what was happening and what was happening on the ground and the bombs that were falling, and then seeing these arms factories here, these Elbit arms factories, Israel's largest weapons manufacturer, right here in Oldham, and in Instro, where they've got a great campaign, a lot of activists in Kent, the Shenstone one, the UAV engines, which is where we were on the roof. And again, like I said, there's the connect of the drones killing my students and killing 2,200 people in 51 days during the bombing in 2014. And then how that relates to the money they're making here in England, the Israeli arms factories. This is why the kind of movements that we're seeing now, and we take off the shackles and we just get down to the rawness of those kids coming into the hospitals one by one while those bombs are falling in Gaza, and then the very weapons being built and the money being made. And like Eamonn said, which I don't know if you heard when I said it, about the fact that the arms trade should be treated like the slave trade, which is coming up now, and we're starting to deal with some of the issues of the historic slave trade. And now we should deal with the arms trade in exactly the same way. We went on the roof of the Oldham Arms Factory in July 2019, just last year, 5-year anniversary of the bombing of Gaza. And the key with direct action is it did wake the whole city up. Oldham suddenly knew that there was an arms factory there. We had done the groundwork. We've done a lot of stalls. We've done a lot of
AD, AD, we can't hear you. Yeah, AD, we're losing you again. So I'm going to stop that now, actually. Sorry.
It's just the last point. It was just the last point to Eamonn, and just to say about how the direct action that we took in Oldham has galvanized the town and the community now. And it's built on what we'd done before with a lot of the stalls and the work and the outreach. My question is, and I think it reflects on the questions people are asking, is how did you build on that? What impact did it have, that direct action? And how did you immediately build on that with all the other routes in to make a lot of action happen?
Just going to unmute you. Eamonn, somehow you've got to be unmuted. Ooh, we're having trouble with the sounds. Bash, are we able to get sound for Eamonn McCann?
Eamonn, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yeah,
can you hear me now?
Thank you. I'll leave you on.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that I think that we achieved or helped to bring about was just a spirit of internationalism in the town and among those in the town who regard themselves, as radical, as the left in Derry, which is a pretty flimsy thing at the best of times. But I think in all the argument and it's about internationalism and where we fit it into it, I think that our action brought that home a little bit, because in defending ourselves after to local people, we had to insist all the time that this wasn't some exotic adventure that we were on, that this was a moral duty, and particularly if you regarded yourself on the left, if you were describing yourself as a socialist, this is something that you as simply had to do. And I think that did change sort of the tenor of political debate in Derry, particularly sort of political debate among people self-defined as radicals. And we know sort of that in some other parties, Sinn Féin and the SDLP, and there were rank and file members who were very critical of their own leaders in having not backed us, and indeed in many cases denounced and smeared us. So it's still an element sort of in political discussion here in Derry, sometimes in an unwanted way. As I mentioned, people will say, you drove jobs out of Derry. I mean, when we have meetings about poverty and about trade union rights and all the rest of it on the left, it always comes up, and that's always a good thing, because when people question you on it, what can you do? What can you do except explain it yet again? And the story, the explanation of it is very clear, and you can put it very clearly. People do understand it. So I think we changed the mood in that way. But of course, there have been ups and downs since, not just in Derry or Ireland, that have been all over Europe and indeed the world. We're in a different situation now. But I think people be more more sensitive now, really, about even about sort of Black Lives Matter and so on. It's not, we've very few Black people in Derry, but we've had a couple of big demonstrations sort of recently in solidarity. And apart from the fact that people mentioning it, they are mentioning sort of the Raytheon action. I have no doubt in my mind at all that we played a little part. And I feel embarrassed talking about having been involved in this thing, but I have no doubt at all that we sparked something and that it still glows and can be blown into a flame. So it's not wasted. It's never wasted. It's never wasted.
Okay, thank you. I'm just gonna, I realise I didn't do the little introduction I had for you, and I know a lot of people know who you are, but I was going to explain that you're an active in socialist politics since the 1960s. You're currently a Derry councillor and previously a member of the Northern Ireland Assembly and a member of People Before Profit, which we have mentioned a few times in terms of any money that we get for the DVD will be going to you. So thank you very much. Now, Jackie Burke, have we got some questions? Yep.
Yes, if Bash can find him, we've got a really good question from Mick Napier, if you could bring him in, Bash.
Hey, hello, Mick.
Fantastic. Hey, Eamonn and Colm, thanks very much for that talk. Always inspiring. I'm really proud my granddaughter was in Bristol last Sunday. But we hear from Johnson and Patel that they're coming for the kids in Bristol who cleaned up that part of the city by throwing Colston in the harbour. You were involved in a defence campaign. What advice would you give to people there and across the whole of Britain who need to defend these people whom we all love and admire for what they've done? And we're sorry we weren't there, but we want to play a role in defending them now. Is this a sort of I am Spartacus moment?
Well, it's something like that. I mean, I certainly think that just to, in defending what was done sort of in Bristol, you're making an argument. Anyway, you're making an argument in a way that brings it home to people, because it's not about something happening far away. It's this person and this person and this person whose faces you know, whose families you might know. And it's they who are bearing the brunt of this. And I think that that's going to have a big effect, sort of, especially if Johnson and Patel, sort of, and the rest of that share of no goods, sort of, I expect them to come after people. I agree with you. I think they are going to come after sort of the young people. They're not going to take this lying down. You know, when they see sort of crowds in Whitehall defacing the sacred statue of Winston Churchill and all the rest of it, and you know, and just the very fact that people are mobilizing on the streets in angry array, we are not going to take that lying down. You might remember that the riots in London, just I forget when that was, 4 or 5 years ago. Sort of afterwards, there was scores, I don't know, maybe 100, but loads and loads of young people, mainly black and brown people, who were then sort of arrested, and some of them sentenced and served quite long terms in prison because the movement had subsided, the anger had gone out of that particular thing. And there were cases of parents taking their children to the police station that I want to do my duty as a good citizen. My son was unfortunately involved in that terrible riot, and discovering that they didn't see their son sort of free for the next 4 or 5 years was a real, don't underestimate the vengeance, the thirst for revenge, and also the class hatred of people like Boris Johnson and Patel. They are going to come after people over the next while, if they're still there. I mean, you never know, sort of, there might be a revolution. But as they are going to come after people, and we got to be prepared. And you say, sort of, what should we do in defense of people? The first thing that should be done, it seems to me, is to promulgate the fact that we're going to need defense and make preparations for it. Well, that's providing money and so on, but more importantly, providing a solidarity for people. I mean, we'd want to see, ideally, wouldn't we, as many people out in defense, sort of people who might be charged, who will be charged, sort of with the Bristol incident. We'd want to see as many people as were out, we saw on our televisions, dragging that statue. We'd like to see those now, and that should be said now. That should be said now, I think.
Thank you, Eamonn. Jackie, we've got some other questions.
We've got a question here from Greg Dropkin. I think this might be one for Mike from the Oldham Peace and Justice. But if you can find Greg Dropkin, could you bring him in, please?
Do you want to read it out if we can't find it?
Yeah, we're just having a challenge actually spotlighting. I'm not sure why, but
well, maybe I'll ask. Shall I ask Greg's question for him if he doesn't mind?
Yes, please.
Greg asked if Oldham Elbit or Elbit has had anything to do with the cyber division of Elbit. So does any of the Oldham group want to come in on that, or does Mike want to come in on that?
Mike Kavanagh, we could do with. Shall I? Hi, Mike. Can you, Bash? Can we unmute? Mike, yeah, there we are.
Hello. Yes, I think Ferranti technology certainly does have some input into the cyber technology of Elbit. Because it's involved in the joint fire training system, which involves setting up battle simulations for training the armed forces in the UK. And that technology has come from Elbit of Israel, and Ferranti and other of the Elbit subsidiaries in the UK are involved. So you can't deny that Ferranti is not involved in cyber technology and the promotion of such stuff throughout the armed forces here, and if they can sell stuff into Europe as well.
Mike, did you want to ask a question? Was yours one of the questions that came up?
It was, yes. Two things. I did get the booklet which the campaign produced. I read that, and also listening to Eamonn, he talks a lot about local politicians. And I think my question was, how far should we be challenging local politicians and the local council to act in support of the campaign?
Thank you, Mike. Eamonn.
Yes, well, I mean, I'm not a great expert in that area, but then again, I don't think anybody is. You know, it's and I think the point of challenging, certainly of challenging local politicians here in Derry, was in effect sort of that was aimed at their rank and file, and that worked to a good extent. And particularly, I won't go into it, wouldn't have time to go into any detail. I mean, that Sinn Féin, which presents itself as a very radical party at times, began in this when it had to grapple with the Raytheon issue as on the right wing. I mean, telling us that we were destructive and useless. And incidentally, some things never change. You know, we had a Black Lives Matter demonstration in Derry sort of last week, run sort of by young black people from Derry, a very tiny minority in Derry, but they were brilliant and they ran it themselves and socially distanced it in a way sort of that a lot of people like the police just wouldn't be capable of. They took an awful lot of stick from parties including Sinn Féin and the SDLP, as well as unionists, and we expect no better from them, about the disrupting sort of and sort of this business. There's something which I've never gone into in writing as much as I should have, which says the peace process in Northern Ireland has been used as a stick with which to beat anybody who steps out of line, politically and every other way. And we've seen that sort of Derry over the past couple of years. So, you know, it's I forgot your question almost. You were asking me, sorry.
Whether it's worth actually spending the time on the local councillors. We have them with us, and we're very pleased to have them with us. But it's yeah. I think you did, yeah, okay.
Sorry, I lose track of things.
Don't worry. But on that note, by the way, if people do want to get involved with our campaign in Elbit, please do email us on the same email that you registered on. We have regular organising meetings and we do have actions. I'll come back to that at the end. Jackie Burke, have we got others? I've got a few here that I've spotted.
Yes, Bash, if you can find Sue Dixon. Sue has a question. I'll give you a couple of seconds. There we go.
There she is. Hi, Sue.
A great evening, thank you. Thank you very much, Eamonn, for your inspiration. and encouragement. I wondered whether you had any encouragement from the workers at the factory during your campaign at all, and whether you think it's really useful and if it would have changed your campaign.
Well, I mean, I have to say, honestly, and a bit sadly, no, we didn't. And I'm not blaming anybody for that, you know. So the young people, there were mainly young who were working at Raytheon, as you say, sort of would have been working sort of at plum jobs in Derry. This high-tech multinational company. It wasn't sort of little rickety a local business, and they weren't unionized. None of the Raytheon wouldn't have a trade union, so they were atomized a bit. But it is interesting that when we went into the factory, there's a couple of workers there. None of them. They got off. One of them said, "Good luck," you know. But I think that was just sort of personal politeness. But they did, and of course, some trade unionists, of course, supported us. Of course, they did. But I can't remember any trade union officials actually supporting us, because they were filled with the idea that their job was, or it was important to them, I mean, to maintain employment, and also, as Colm was mentioning, I mean, earlier, the whole notion of the peace process, as I say, has been used sort of for reactionary reasons. So that made people a bit nervous about supporting us. But we got a lot of support. We got support from, I mean, local Christian pacifists, for example, sort of, and people who would be disparagingly regarded sort of the tree hugger community, who are terrific. I had no problem with them at all. Which they would think more politically, but nevertheless, we got a lot of expanded support from that. I mean, there would have been a few thousand people in Derry at the end of it all who were actually declaring their support for us, and the local newspapers reflected that when they had to stop with the strident denunciation and offer what they might have thought was constructive criticism, or the best that they could offer as a constructive criticism. So the blunt answer is about the workers in Raytheon. No, we didn't get support from them.
Thank you, Eamonn, and thank you, Sue. It is something that we do grapple with as well, because we are regularly out there as the workers come out, and we keep revisiting our relationship there. But and they are quite skilled work, some of them. There's a range there, and Oldham we have that thrown. Yes, there are big issues in Oldham around jobs, so we do have to be mindful. But we have been given an example, haven't we, recently, about how you can switch suddenly to more socially useful things.
Yeah.
We have to keep those ideals. Jackie, any other questions? We have got some, I know. Would you like to?
I wondered whether we could find Anne Tucker, who would like to ask a question, if you can find Anne. Just give it a few seconds, and if not, I'll ask Anne's.
There she is. Hello, thank you, Anne. The floor is yours. Oh, hang on. Not if we don't unmute you. Just a minute. Anne, we can't hear you. Anne, can you unmute yourself or not? There we are. There we are. Sorry, Anne. And again.
Better. It says the host is not allowing you to unmute yourself.
No, there we are. Yeah, there we are. We can hear you now.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, it's quite a simple question, really. I was really interested in watching the video, and I was astonished that you got that success and that you managed to win. And I was interested, when you were talking about it, whether you think that the sort of politicisation and the whole issue about the struggles in Northern Ireland and Derry in particular might have had some bearing on why there was the people in the justice system, and you, as you just said now, the newspaper as well, were more favourable to you than I can't imagine something like that happening here in Manchester, for example. And I just wondered how much your particular context and history you think might have had an effect on it.
Oh, I certainly think that it did. You know, I think of the whole experience in the North since the late 1960s of the civil rights movement, of people breaking the law, occupying places. Wasn't the first place I've occupied in my time. And people got used to that, and at times, of course, that occupations and pickets and all the disruption of official events. When it was done in the name of the civil rights movement or against the sectarianism of the northern state, there's quite a lot of people would have instinctively have supported it. And as I say, unlike, strangely enough, sort of the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement tolerated. When I say they tolerated violence, I don't mean that, but violence was an organic outgrowth from the civil rights campaigns in a way that it isn't, sort of in relation to the anti-war movement. So that communal drive sort of that you had in the civil rights movement, and that, I mean, it might seem to be slightly contradicting some of the things I said before, but there's no question in my mind that the fact that we came from a city, Derry, which had seen sort of an uprising in late 60s and early 70s, which had experienced Bloody Sunday in January 1972. Incidentally, now that I'm here, next Tuesday will be the 10th anniversary of the publication of the Savile Report, sort of into Bloody Sunday, sort of, which was they greeted by some of the elements, all of the elements I've mentioned, Sinn Féin, the SDLP, the Dublin government, all the local press here. You know, that the publication of the Savile inquiry was a terrific thing because it had sorted out and dealt with the Bloody Sunday issue. Of course, it didn't at all. But that's a very minority point of view, and it's hard to get it heard here. We just keep at it and so forth. But in the local context, yes, the local context, it was supportive of us, sort of encouraged people not to see us as wild people who were doing something right outside the political mainstream. They'd seen a lot of trouble, a lot of occupations in Derry before Raytheon.
Thank you, Anne, for that. I'm going to, Jackie, I know we're getting a number of questions about the Lucas, so we'll come back to that in a minute, but Tarek, I think Tarek wants to come in at this point, so if we can find Tarek. Yeah, thank you. Now, can we unmute Tarek? Sorry, guys.
Are we in?
Yep, we are. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah, very inspirational film. For myself, somebody who lives, I'd say, about a 3-minute walk from this factory that's manufacturing weapons of mass destruction. I think in Oldham we've got a very large Kashmiri community, and one of the big issues, especially for me over the last year or so, is the lockdown in Kashmir and how some of the tactics which are being used in Israel are now being deployed in parts of Kashmir. And with Elbit supplying weaponry to especially the Indian regime, we've been really trying to get the Kashmiri community on board to understand some of the key issues and also the importance of shutting this factory down. So we are kind of bringing other people into the fold. But like I said, it's a very, at times it's an uphill struggle to trying to get people on board, especially people who live so near because they think it's something that doesn't affect them. But like I said, last year, the Oldham Peace and Justice movement were involved in a protest with the Kashmiri community, and it was very, very well attended. So yeah, I've taken a lot of inspiration from how you guys, stuck to the task. And at times it can be a bit downheartening when you don't get the numbers outside the gates. But I suppose it's something that we've just got to. It's a marathon rather than a sprint. So glad to be here and sharing ideas with you guys.
Thank you, Tarek. And yeah, Eamonn, do you want to say anything, or can I?
Yes, I'm a very, very brief. I mean, just what Tarek was talking, and also earlier I was talking about what I was talking and others about. Small numbers of people involved in solidarity action can be very important. When we were within a couple of days of the Raytheon occupation, after we had been released from the prison, and were awaiting trial, I remember seeing, there was a picket of 6 people in Tucson, Arizona. Not as much outside Raytheon, they'd be pushed a mile away, but just the thing saying solidarity with Derry. And I collapsed. We all did. It had a big effect on us. you know, say, wow, you know, it's a cowboy town. What is this? So I've just said that as an example of the way in which, into our Kashmiri friend there, that as I say, as I keep saying, sort of, it's never wasted, and you never know who's watching and who's looking and who's taking inspiration and giving inspiration to you. So it's I wish you well. I wish you well.
Thank you. And actually, the protests have been very solid, really, in that they're regular, and it has been quite a mix. And we do welcome, and this is another point of what you can do, other groups, not definitely our local residents and people, and we're growing that, but other peace groups, if you're involved, want to come and do something outside Elbit, let us know. Just come. It's great. It's like a web. And with Tariq, I think we're definitely, this is very different from a year ago. We know it's a long haul, and there's a lot of parallels to be drawn at the minute with things that are happening and coming to the fore. Jackie, have we got a few more questions? I'm aware of the time now.
Yeah, I think there've been a few comments and questions about the Lucas plan, and Greg Chalice, if we could find him, had a specific question regarding the Lucas plan. If we can unmute Greg.
I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, well done. You came in there quick. Off you go.
Well, thanks to everyone, and thanks to Eamonn. And just very quickly.
Incidentally, hello, Greg. It's been years since we've met. Great to see you.
I was just thinking, 1992, and Eamonn stood for the General Secretary of the National Union of Journalists, in which you still active, I think. I don't know if it's a pattern, Eamonn, but I think you might have got a derisory vote in that one as well.
I was 4th out of 5. So there was
4th out of 5. Fantastic. So there's this, you know, it's this issue really about the just transition, isn't it? I think Caroline's raised that, you know, when we're looking at the Green New Deal, if there's going to be a transition from the kind of economy that we have now to an economy where production is more focused on the environment, then, you know, what safeguards are there going to be for workers, and is there a role for that kind of Lucas plan type approach where you're quite specific about the ins and outs of how you can employ people, you know, make with socially useful production rather than production of weapons of mass destruction.
Eamonn, do you want to answer that? And then I think Jackie's probably got something, maybe have something to add from C&D point of view.
It seems like a C&D specific, not specific, but it's more their natural territory. So Jackie talks, I may talk after her.
Okay, Jackie, sorry, I've just put you on the spot. Do you want to bring anything here?
Yeah, obviously it's something that C&D is working on, and we've spent quite a bit of time going out to trade union conferences and talking to trade unionists about a new Lucas plan. And we're doing a lot of work on arms conversion and defence diversification. So obviously producing booklets so that we can go and talk to people and talk to trade unions, because it's really important that we get trade unions on board from you know, branches up. We think it should be done that way. So talking to union branch members, etc. And we've also done quite a few workshops and meetings with the new Lucas plan people as well. So I would definitely recommend anybody out there that's interested in this, in diversification, Green New Deal, Build Back Better, any of those issues, get in touch with Greater Manchester and District C&D. I'll put the email address on here. But there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work being done, and we're actually planning a webinar soon, sometime in July. I'll confirm the dates, with Fabian Hamilton, Minister for Peace and Disarmament, on this sort of issue as well. So yes, a lot being done. This is a great opportunity for us.
Eamonn, did you want to add anything?
No, thanks. No, thanks.
Okay, and then Jackie, have you got any other questions? I've got one, I think, that I've got, but have you had any others?
There's been a couple of questions, I think, that are probably aimed at Mike again. Colm pointed out that Raytheon relied on government grants and tax breaks are there parallels with Elbit in Oldham, which I think is we know the answer to that, but it'd be nice if Mike could come back on it. And Kate from Northampton Palestine Solidarity Campaign wanted to know if we would share the results of the inquiry into government funding of Elbit at some point. So over to you, Mike.
Hi. We have to talk about a company called Sharing and Growth, which has been set up by arms companies and the Regional Growth Fund, the British government's Regional Growth Fund, to support efficiency and new workings for companies in the aerospace sector. And Elbit Ferranti technology has been supported by this company to train employees in to make better sales, be more efficient and more productive in what they do. And so the government, through its Regional Growth Fund, is actually financing part of this training through its grant. And there are another, I think, at least 40 companies that are also sharing, getting benefit from Sharing and Growth's involvement in their in improving their productivity. So not only that, the Elbit Ferranti Technologies may also have some grants from the local council, which we haven't got to the bottom of yet, but they may be being supported in a small way by the local council. And the local council as well has allowed Ferranti to join in the past school conferences promoting industry in Oldham, and in other ways the council has promoted Ferranti as an important factory in its area. So there are connections with government, certainly. We've been talking to the Department of Business about Sharing and Growth, trying to find out exactly a clear notion of what it's actually doing for Ferranti Technologies, but as yet we're not getting a clear answer at all. What we've also tried to find out is if, in fact, the Department of Business has in fact been receiving recommendations, maybe from other arms companies in the UK, such as Rolls-Royce, which Ferranti does business with, or from Elbit Systems of Israel itself to say, could you help out Ferranti Technologies improve its workflow? So the government does help companies involved with Elbit, and that is a very bad thing. I mean, recently they've opened an office in Bristol, which is right next door to the Army's training centre, and also next to the Ministry of Defence Equipment and Support section. So Elbit UK is trying to get in through every door that's available to it. As was mentioned before, Raytheon is involved in the United States. So Elbit UK and Elbit of Israel will want to have government links and continue to expand its business in the UK, which it has certainly done since 2010 when the Tories got into power. It has pals, I feel, within the Tories.
Thank you, Mike. I think we are approaching the end. People are putting comments on the chat. Jackie, have you got other questions? I got one early on about whether we're any nearer ending the arms trade, which I'm not sure whether we want to go out on a high or keep the fight going, because we can't let it drop. Eamonn, do you want to come back? And then I will conclude unless there's anything else.
Well, I'd just like to thank you all, I mean, for allowing me to be here. Sort of, I've never done a thing like it. I'm a technophobe, sort of, and I'm a determined and practiced Luddite. You know, it took me a long time to admit that Facebook might catch on. You know, so I've really enjoyed this, and sort of and understood a bit better what a tool and what a useful tool it can be. But I mean, all I'd say at the end, sort of, and it's I'm just looking out over the bogside on our city walls here and so forth, sort of, in the bright sunshine, and what with there be no pollution left anymore, sort of. It's bright skies and clear air, sort of, and small animals gambling on the verges, sort of, of the roads and all. So it's it's a lovely time to be around. It's a lovely peaceful time, and around here, and it gives a wee glimpse of how things might be. That's all, just a glimpse of how things might be, how vegetation might grow and creatures survive and human beings sort of be at ease with one another. And that's what we're defending, really. And it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. And it's a wonderful, just having you all here, sort of you having me here, sort of as it's been terrific. It's been terrific.
Well, I want to thank you again, Eamonn, truly. Thank you for on behalf of Oldham Peace and Justice. Very inspirational. Yes, we're coming to grips with this technology as well. And I have to thank somebody, Bash, who's twiddling away in the background there, really, because this has made it happen very well. So that's Manchester PSC. Before we go, I do again want to remind people that if they do want to get involved with Oldham Peace and Justice, we've not got an immediate date, but we plan things all the time. And we usually send it out on our email system and on the Facebook page on events. People have been posting up, it's Oldham Peace and Justice, all one go, @gmail.com. That is what you were told the registration details for this. We will be contacting you again to see if you want to remain involved. And that's when we let you know when we're doing our regular vigils and any other ideas that you may have. We do need donations as well, and we would let you know how to do that, because yes, we're not a big group, but we're perfectly formed. We are looking for new members, and we are definitely trying to do community-based activities. Can I thank you all? Now we're going to hopefully, if Bash is still there in the background, see you out, as it were, with the video clip of the Elbit rooftop protest that was so inspirational. And thank you, Adi. I'm sorry we couldn't hear you so well, but so let's see about this. And please watch and then leave. We will be closing the meeting after this finishes, but it's been fantastic to see you all. Thank you very much. We have a lot to do, and we hope to see you at some of our future actions. Thank you very much. And thank you, Eamonn and Colm.
.45 ambulances that were bombed, the 62 clinics and hospitals that were bombed in 2014, 51 days in the summer of that year. All that, the majority was done by drones. And Elbit are the biggest manufacturer of drones. This is an Elbit factory. Elbit are boasting about being the backbone of the Israeli drone fleet. They sell their drones and their other weapons like white phosphorus, the flesh-tearing weapons that go right through human skin, illegal under international law. The same with cluster munitions that they produce, small cluster bombers that little kids can step on after they've landed. These are the kind of things that this industry is creating and making billions of. And enough, they are the criminals. This is the real gun running on a mass murderous level. And it's time that everybody stood up to this horrific toxic arms trade. And it's time that the Israeli arms trade does not benefit from the siege of Gaza, from surrounding an entire population that is mostly children, from regularly bombing Palestine like they did in 2009 when they bombed it for 3 weeks, killing 1,400 Palestinians, 330 children. The same in 2012. But I saw a family, the Duluth family, the rubble of their house, 13 members of their family were pulled out. They bombed a school. They bombed so many different, the football stadium. This is what I saw when I was in Gaza, in the hospitals, as the kids were coming. I wanted the intensive care unit. Other people here have been to Palestine. I suggest everybody sees for themselves, and they'll realise that the end point of these bombs is this mass carnage and this mass trauma. And when you know these people and you see how loving they are, and when you see their lives turned over and turned upside down by what is happening, what they're using these weapons for. So we are calling for an arms embargo, a two-way arms embargo with Israel, just like the court ruled on South Africa, on Saudi Arabia. We're calling for an end to the arms trade. They have actually increased by hundreds of millions our weapons to Israel since the bombing of Gaza in 2014. So it's like they are using it as a laboratory to make more weapons, to say battle-tested